that this is an interesting look, the way Luke will present it to us, of the heart of a mother and the heart of God. And without wanting to moralize the scriptures, but enabling you to look in the scriptures and see God at work, I want to make that the focus, but I don't want to miss how God is at work uniquely in the life of this woman. I raise this because there's something about a mother's love in reference to her children, the pursuit of this woman going back, that needs to be lifted up, highlighted, and identified as something significant, not just for the people of the first century, but for you and I going forward. And it's something about this woman, Mary, who is identified in Luke 1 as favored by God, overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, and her ability to conceive without the help of a man. The virgin birth being a theological foundation from which every Christian will never retreat. And recognizing that God is at work in this woman in a specific way so that what she's able to do is outside of her own abilities because God is at work in her life. We're 12 years in, though, now, and Mary has had the unique privilege of raising Jesus, watching Jesus grow. And there's something in this text about her love that is significant in the way that she makes her way and Joseph back to find a son they think is lost. And let me just offer this definition. Motherhood, by definition, is the end of self-absorption. Motherhood, by definition, is the end of self-centeredness, self-absorption. The commitment to self ends once a mother bears fruit by way of children. In fact, if you were to recognize this more physiologically, everything about a woman changes in many ways after childbirth. She has to give up, in some cases, dreams she had. She has to give up goals and aspirations in some way. And to a large degree, she even has to give up the body that used to be hers. Because the body she had now is going to be altered on the basis of childbirth. In fact, she could almost say, in my body, I bear the marks of sacrifice. That's why I don't have much patience for brothers who are all bent out of shape around the fact that she gained some weight. See, she gained weight for you, bearing your son, bearing your daughter, and all the stuff you want her to be. If you ignore the fact that she was the one in labor giving birth to your child, if you ignore that on the basis of your own self-absorption, you're foolish. You ought to be applauding her and saying thank you for the sacrifice, because nothing she has is what it used to be after having given birth to your child. You walking around here talking about you wish she still had a shape like a Coca-Cola bottle. Well, you ain't a six-pack no more. You more like a liter bottle. She ain't bothering you. She makes her way back because motherhood, by definition, is the end of being self-centered. Her concern now is for her son. And she's making her way back with Joseph to Jerusalem because she has a mother's love. Notice the text, though. The text says that they've come out of the festival, the Passover festival. And so when Jesus was 12 years old, they attended the festival as usual. And after the celebration was over, they started home to Nazareth, but Jesus stayed behind. His parents didn't miss him at first because they assumed he was among the other travelers. But when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among their relatives and their friends. Notice what's happened. Praise has now become panic. I don't know why God sovereignly deems it so, but sometimes the best worship experiences are followed by the most panic-stricken crises. And so she's come from the festival of worship. She's come from the place of offering praise to God, and now she's in crisis mode because there is something missing. The son is no longer a part of the community, and now Mary takes the time to try to figure out with Joseph what in the world has happened. Verse 44, because they assumed he was among the other travelers, but when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among their relatives and friends. I want to offer this caveat. No matter who you are, woman or man, it's always dangerous to assume Jesus is with you when he's not. There are a lot of people who assume that Christ is on their side. They assume that they're walking with the Master. But it's dangerous to be assuming that Jesus is with me when in fact he is not. And here's what every mother understands about this text, this narrative. That Mary goes now looking for Jesus among relatives and among friends, only to find out that he's not there. And you see, when you really are embraced with the love of a mother, one of the things you have to sort of adjust to is that at some level and in some ways, people are going to let you down. You see, every mother knows that to some degree, we have to depend on others to help us raise our children. If you don't believe you need other people to help you raise your children, you are one of those deceived people living in a fantasy. Every mother understands sometimes, and particularly single women who have to work outside the home or single women who don't have spouses. At some point, you got to trust somebody else with your baby. It's either going to be a babysitter, it's going to be a nursery school teacher, it may be a pastor in a church, a Sunday school teacher, it may be a coach, it may be a school nurse. The reality is that at some point, you're going to have to entrust your child with somebody else. And can't you hear Mary? What do you mean he's not with you? I thought he was with you. That's why she's searching among family and friends, only to find out that guess what? The family and friends don't have a clue as to where Jesus is. And one of the points of the passage is that mothers in particularly have to recognize that at some point people are going to let you down. You cannot have a life where people, whether they are babysitters, coaches, school teachers, always do what's right by your child. There is somebody who you will entrust your child to, and that person will fail you. Someone has said, well, what do I do when people fail me? Grieve. You mourn the fact that your expectations were not met. You mourn the fact that they have disappointed you. You mourn and you hurt, and then you get up and you keep going. You can't stay in the place of the camp arguing with people about why Jesus is not with them. Because at some point, the lost son has to be found. And so you grieve and you hurt. And if you don't believe that people would disappoint you, I brought 3 witnesses to prove that I'm right. If you don't think people will let you down, ask my friend Job. Job says that when I went through the worst crises of my life, he said, I sat for days. I had 3 friends that I thought were going to speak to me. He said, but for 3 days, but for days, they never said a word. He said, and as long as they were quiet, they were okay. When they opened their mouth, they got it all wrong. They had no idea what God was doing. Job, how do you feel about that? They let me down. Come here, I got another witness. His name is Joseph. Because he and I did time together in the same penitentiary. And we talked about what we would do when we got out. And 2 of them were able to be pardoned, paroled. And they said, if I ever get out of here, Joe, I'm going to remember you. But when they got out of jail, they completely forgot all about me. And I had all of my hopes on them and their remembrance of me. And guess what? They let me down. I'm not just thinking of Job and Joseph. I'm thinking of Jesus. Because I heard a guy named Peter say, don't worry about it, Lord. If everybody forsakes you, I'll die with you. And then later on, when the cock crowed 3 times, here was Peter with his head hung down, and Jesus said, I'm here to tell you, people will let you down. Any mother can appreciate what it means to have entrusted your child to someone, and they let you down. You say, Williams, what I do? Well, I grieve, but then I got to keep on going. Now, let me give you a tip. Sometimes when you are let down and disappointed, you grieve. And sometimes the proper response to that letdown is to talk to the person. I'm not talking about talk to them in a Housewives of Atlanta way. I'm saying sometimes when people let you down, you have to talk to them. Other times when people let you down, you don't necessarily have to talk to them. Sometimes you need to get some counseling to help you through a dark disappointment. Sometimes you have to then create boundaries between yourself and them so that you're not hurt anymore. And sometimes after talking, sometimes after counseling, sometimes after building boundaries, you have to still make a decision to grieve and get on with your life. You cannot indict everybody that ever hurt you. And sisters, I identify that sometimes men have been mean and unfair and they've mistreated you. And you can't measure every man you see based upon the one that hurt you. You've got to be able to recognize and know there's some still decent men on the planet. And even if you haven't met him yet, don't surrender the reality that all men are not dogs. All men are not bad. All men are not out to hurt you. Because at some point, you got to grieve and keep going. You got to let it go. But then you've also got to lose and relinquish control. Here's what I'm saying. Look at this text. When they couldn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem. 3 days they're looking for Jesus. And finally they discover him in the temple, sitting among the religious leaders, listening to them and asking questions. All who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. His parents didn't know what to think. Son, his mother said to him, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been frantic, searching for you everywhere. One of the things parents typically will do is parents always live so vicariously through their children that when a child does something wrong, they say, look what you did to me. That's the wrong identification. And the next time your son or daughter lets you down, avoid language like, how could you do this to me? Because they haven't done anything to you. They've done it to themselves. And let me offer you a counseling tip. You can be a great parent and still have kids who get into stuff. Because you can also be a horrible parent and produce world-class championship kids. Which means at the end of the day, you can't take any credit. So you don't have to suffer all of the negative flack for their misbehavior, and you don't take all of the glory for their good behavior. You got to recognize some measure of balance. Lord, I feel like making this point. Sometimes what happens is you get too high and mighty. When I talk to parents and their kids have turned out great, they start telling me all they did. And what I want to say to them, they ain't nothing but grace. Because Samson had the best parents on the planet. But Samson had a hard head and a decision to do what he wanted to do. So he decides to take the honey out of the carcass in the midst of the bees and the buzzing and the dead lion. And Samson is stung by the honey, not by the bees. That's a whole nother conversation. But his mom and his daddy, they were good people. And so you can't take on all of the credit when kids grow up well, and you can't take all of the blame when they fail. You've got to pause and just say, you know what? Thank you, Lord, because it's nothing but your grace. The truth is that Mary has come to a point where she has now been forced to, in many ways, relinquish control. And for mothers, it can be difficult, especially with sons. You see, at some point, what a woman's got to do is realize there's a time in a child's growth and development where she has to let that child go. Jesus is doing what he's supposed to be doing. And sometimes for mothers, this is hard, especially with sons. Because sometimes a mother is the kind of person who says, no matter what, you'll always be my baby. And that's a problem for the child, and it's a problem for the mother, particularly if it's a boy, because what a boy doesn't need is to grow up being so pampered and mommied by mother that he's not able to become a man. Because a real woman will tell you that a mama's boy can't do her no good. Every parent, every mother has to learn when to relinquish control of a child and allow that child to become what it is that child is supposed to become. This is particularly true in homes where there are two parents. I realize it is nuanced where there is not that sort of nuclear family. It's for this reason. A mother is designed to teach a child, nurture a child, what life and love looks like inside the home. The responsibility of that father is to teach that child what life is like outside of the home. And at some point within that context, if a woman does not relinquish that child to that other authority, they hurt that child's ability to live outside of the environment called home. You see, inside the house, there is nurture and support. But inside the house, there is nurture and support. But outside of the house, there is no such thing as nurture. There's no such thing as support. When you get to the corporate arena, ain't nobody going to love you just because. Mama will love you with sleep in your eye and snot in your nose. And she will say, still, come here, give me a hug. Daddy will say, go blow your nose and wash your face. Because inside the home, the mother's responsibility is to nurture and support that child in the home. The father's responsibility is to prepare that child for life outside, which means sometimes the mother has to let that child go so that he or she can be formed for the next phase of life. Because when you sit down for a job application, there's no mother's love. When they decide to promote or demote you, there's no mother's love. And so there needs to be this environment of relinquishing and understanding that there is this need for something else to turn loose that child so they can be what it is God wants them to be. In fact, when I was in the 7th grade, Philadelphia was going through its own struggles, and they were taking kids out of West Philly and busing them to the northeast section of town. And so they were taking blacks, sending them to white communities in order to integrate. I was at Oxford Circle the other day, and I thought to myself, mission accomplished. Because there are parts of Philly that used to be exclusively white that are now mixed. At that time, though, I was supposed to catch the G bus, elevated Market Street to the end of the line, in bus to school. First day, Mama took me. I said, appreciate it very much. Second day, I said, well, I got my tokens. Mama said, no, I'm going to take you to school. I said, okay. Third day, Mama said, I'm going to take you to school today. Right about lunchtime, I'm in the schoolyard playing, and I look at this figure up on the fence, and I'm thinking to myself, man, that looked like my mother. And upon closer inspection, there she is. And so I try to, in a sort of cool way, because I don't want to hurt her, I'm like, hey, why are you still here? Because the truth is, in 7th grade, with your mama hanging around, she's messing up your MAC. Yep. It's like people know that's your mom's over there. And she's like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, nah, you're going to have to let me go now because you're messing me up. And what happens is, at some point, every mother has to know that moment when it's time to turn loose and let that kid be what it is God has to make out of that kid. I didn't say you stop loving, but if you continue to hold on too tight, you're going to cripple and handicap the growth and development and maturity of the child. And while I know you love them, you need somebody to speak into your life. Somebody says, well, I don't have a husband. Doesn't have to be a husband. It can be a coach. It can be a mentor. It can be a gym teacher. Somebody that says, you know what, get up off him now, let him go. And Mary has come to the point now where she's struggling at 12 years old with how do I let him go now? And Jesus helps her. He says, look, I've got to be about my Father's business, with Joseph standing there. You see, Jesus is framed now in such a way that he understands the bigger picture and the bigger mission, which is for him to fulfill his responsibility of coming for lost people. You see, Jesus is not lost. Jesus is now engaged in the mission for which he was born. He's there now in the temple that he will ultimately destroy. Engaged in what God has called him to be and do. And if not for the great wisdom of Mary to understand this and let go, the message for modern day mothers is to embrace, understand this, and move in a way that now entrusts the son, the daughter, into the hands of another father who has a mission and a purpose for them that you may know absolutely nothing about. This is why Jesus says, no, I'm attending here in my Father's house to business that is consistent with what God has called me to do. And he doesn't say it in a way to hurt her. And here's what Mary does. She takes it and inscribes it on the notebook of her heart. The text says, then he returned to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, and his mother stored all these things in her heart. Because a mother's heart is a notebook that writes, scribes, stores. And that heart can be easily, fragilely decimated by people who don't understand the heart of a mother. The heart of a mother to pursue her son is what it means to be a mother who's committed to moving and creating and preserving. You see, that's the nature of women. They create, they preserve. That's why, in no small measure, a woman would hang on even to a jacked up dude, thinking that she can transform him, almost to the point of where it's too late. And the whole world is saying, you need to drop that Negro. Because in her love, she's pursuing him even though he's trifling. You know who that sounds like? That sounds like God. Because what I know about Christ is that when he should have cut us off, because of his love for us, when we were lost, his pursuit of us has been ongoing and permanent. And what you have in mothers is a model of the love of God that pursues, loves, is willing to embrace no matter what. And I think that there's something about this mother's love that we ought to embrace that allows us to sometimes move through disappointment, move through heartache, and keep right on going, that enables us to relinquish control and say, God, you do what nobody else can do. Father, I'm surrendering my sons, my daughters, my husband, my job. I'm giving it up to you. I talked to a man who is, he's an unfaithful man. He just ain't faithful. And he wasn't about 10 years ago. He's much better now. He's a Boy Scout now. I'm talking about he good as gold. And I said to him, I said, well, how in the world did your wife handle you throughout all those years? He said, she stopped trying to figure me out and police me. I said, well, what did she do? He said, she told me one time, exact words, I don't trust you, but I trust the Lord. And the Lord will do with you what needs to be done, whether I see it, know it. I don't trust you, but I trust him with you. And he said to me, it changed my life forever. And I'm submitting to you, ladies, if you'll just trust the Lord. You can't trust the job, I know. You can't trust everything and everybody. But if you trust him, the Lord can do what nobody else can do in ways that will, do I have a witness? You can't trust yourself, but if you'll trust him with the stuff you love, you can see God do some things that will turn lives completely around. And people will call you blessed because you will have taught them what it means to have a vibrant, growing, transformative relationship with Christ, our King. Come on, stand up and say.